Walt Whitman, endorsed and brought to you by the NIH. Well, maybe not quite that extreme, but we do have a little bit of something to talk about at the end of this poetry discussion, which would lead you to believe that there is some benefit to be had from reading the poet. Welcome to Strip Cover Lit, where we squeeze the bigger picture out of literature. I'm Adrian Fort, and we're here for another poetry discussion, which will appear, of course, in three different playlists here on the channel. Number one, the poetry discussion playlist. Number two, the Walt Whitman playlist. But number three, this is the seventh verse of Song of Myself, and this is going to appear in the verse by verse playlist for that collection. Now, the poem reads as such. Has anyone supposed it lucky to be born? I hasten to inform him or her it is just as lucky to die, and I know it. I pass death with the dying and birth with the new washed babe, and am not contained between my hat and boots, and peruse manifold objects, know two alike in every one good. The earth good, and the stars good, and their adjuncts all good. I am not an earth nor an adjunct of an earth. I am the mate and companion of people, all just as immortal and fathomless as myself. They do not know how immortal, but I know. Every kind for itself and its own, for me, mine, male and female. For me, those that have been boys and that love women. For me, the man that is proud and feels how it stings to be slighted. For me, the sweetheart and the old maid. For me, mothers and the mothers of mothers. For me, lips that have smiled, eyes that have shed tears. For me, children and the begetters of children. Undrape, you are not guilty to me, nor stale nor discarded. No, or I see through the broadcloth and gingham whether or no. And am around tenacious, acquisitive, tireless, and cannot be shaken away. Now, something struck me in this poem, and it struck me really here. Undrape, you are not guilty to me, nor stale nor discarded. And then thinking of the poem in itself, in its entirety, at least in as much as I could remember. I pass death with the dying and birth with the new washed babe, and am not contained between my hat and boots. Now, this portion of this may seem contradictory to the portion that I'm going to emphasize and what I'm going to talk about, but I don't think that it is. I want to talk about presentness, mindfulness, because I think that I think that it helps to take certain ideas into poems and poets. If you take the idea of finitude into Emily Dickinson, your reading of her poetry will be more robust. If you take the idea of individuality and struggling for individuality into the short stories of Ernest Hemingway, how important it is to be an individual. You take that idea into Ernest Hemingway, it becomes more profitable. I think there are certain ideas that make every type of writing, every story, every poem, every poet, every writer more profitable for the reader if they are kept in mind once in a while. From the NIH, in a paper titled Being Present and Enjoying It, Dispositional Mindfulness and Savoring the Moment are Distinct Interactive Predictors of Positive Emotions and Psychological Health, from Laura G. Kicken, Christian B. Lundberg, and Barbara L. Fredrickson, I have stolen the following quote. Now here's what I want to think about with this quote. A, does this quote not seem to be describing the poetry, the voice, and the eccentric artist that was Walt Whitman? That's the first thing. Does it not sound as if it was written by Walt Whitman? And number two, does it not sound as if it is describing the ideas behind much of Walt Whitman's writing? And further, I think if these two things are true, that it sounds as if it is describing Walt Whitman and it sounds as if it is describing Walt Whitman's poetry, I think then it must be true that Walt Whitman's poetry conveys this type of mindfulness and helps put us in this type of mindset. The article reads as such: the concept of mindfulness generally has been conceptualized in the scientific literature as fundamentally involving a highly receptive, non-judgmental awareness and attention to whatever is present in the moment, whether pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. In addition, to lay and scholarly interest in I think it's a scholarly interest, but to lay a scholarly interest in mindfulness as a style or target mental state of discrete meditation sessions, considerable interest also pertains to the characterological tendency to be mindful in daily life. Although some debate exists about conceptualizations of mindfulness as a trait, substantial empirical evidence demonstrates value in examining the construct termed and assessed as dispositional mindfulness. Research using samples from various populations suggests that individuals generally differ in their tendency to be mindful in daily life, and that higher levels of dispositional mindfulness predict less distress and greater well-being. Dispositional mindfulness may be boosted through repeated practice of mindfulness meditation over time. However, in the absence of mindfulness training, this tendency appears to be stable and trait-like. Basically saying that this idea presented by Walt Whitman of being everywhere and nowhere seems nonsensical. Sure, kind of it is. This idea presented by Walt Whitman of I will not judge you, we are here together, seems kind of hippie-ish, and yeah, it is. Both of those things in conjunction, both of those things together, seem to be a practice of dispositional mindfulness. Dispositional mindfulness meaning this is just the way he is. Walt Whitman's just this guy. He's not saying, okay, I gotta stop and be present. Walt Whitman's just there, man. Yeah. Higher levels of dispositional mindfulness, the article says, leads to, where was it there? Dispositional mindfulness predict less distress and greater well-being. Walt Whitman is seen almost as a poet without shame, and perhaps he was, but that type of shamelessness would have some type of release, would it not? That type of shamelessness was certainly not, I would conject, the American ethos of the time. the American ethos of the time being very Protestant work ethic, etc. This type of mindfulness, presentness, presented by Walt Whitman in his poetry, is not just carefree in that the words feel good. It may be carefree the way that dispositional mindfulness is carefree on the surface, but deeper than that, it is something that the practitioner knows where their control ends. If you know where your control ends and you're comfortable with that because you can't be uncomfortable with it because being uncomfortable with it does nothing for you, you simply accept this is where my control ends, thus rooting you firmly in the present, you are less stressed. And that may seem to other people, it may seem that you are in that case hedonistic almost. Many people sort of think of Walt Whitman nearing hedonism, but I don't think it's the same thing. And I think that the difference lies in this type of dispositional mindfulness. That's all I have for this poetry discussion. If you like or appreciate what it is that I do here, hitting a like button really does help me out, as it tells YouTube to share this video with other literature lovers. If you find yourself here by chance but not design, literature is the only thing I talk about on this channel, dropping multiple videos every single week, and I hope to have you back for the next one.